Take Command podcast from Odyssey Sports. Logan Paulson there. I am Craig Hoffman. Again, if you have not subscribed to the pod, love you to do so, just for your sake. We don't want you to miss an episode. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, the free Odyssey app, or full episodes on YouTube. If you want to watch us, youtube.com/@1067 The Fan. And don't miss us pregame Sundays on the radio on Team 980. Of course, on 1067 The Fan, on both YouTube channels, live at Tap Sports Bar, MGM National Harbor. And then the post-game show, roughly 90 minutes after the game. On it being a little closer to 2 hours this week. But again, subscribe on YouTube. That's a YouTube-only stream. And then the pod comes out first thing Monday morning. So youtube.com/@the-team980 and @1067 The Fan. Okay, let's get into the defense, Logan. Let's start at the beginning. Let's get it out of the way, flush it from our systems, then never talk about it again. What the hell happened the first quarter and a half defensively where Denver gets out 3 touchdowns, 3 drives in thoroughly dominant fashion?
Yeah, so I think they came out with a really good game plan. One of the first things that stuck out to me is they really came out and said, we're going to run a lot of pin pull stuff. You know what I mean? Like a lot of this kind of like what I would call truck or taxi, which is like where you are blocking down with the receiver, you're pulling the offensive lineman, you're leading with the fullback. And, we've talked about that concept before, versions of that concept. I think when we were going to play Arizona, that was something that came up quite a bit. But this team has a hard time fitting those runs for whatever reason. I'm not exactly sure why that is. Like the technique that they're telling the defensive ends to employ is to like run basically straight up the field, get that guy to bubble, get the running back to bubble, and then hopefully pursuit hits it. But, they ran that play twice. The first big run was that play. And again, like that's something that needs to be better. Jamin is on the first one, runs outside. He's playing that like overhang will backer, fits the tackle. You get 2 guys outside, you get Forbes outside, you get Jamin outside, and then Cody, who's playing in the backside B gap. There's no feasible way you can expect him to get over there, like just based on the structure of the front. He gets walled out of a gap. He gets blocked. But I'm also like, someone is messed up on the front side of this run. I don't know if Jamin's supposed to wrong arm that guard, basically hit his inside shoulder to try and get the back to bubble to the corner. But they misfit that. And again, that ends up being a big play. And that's one play they've had a consistently hard time fitting. And they run that again for the touchdown on that same drive. Like, that's kind of what they want to do, right? Is they ran that. The crazy thing to me is that Sean Payton did not run that play after they scored a touchdown with it. So, like, they had 2 huge gasses, and then they were like, no, we're good. We're not going to run that play anymore. So that's a good example to me of an offensive coordinator kind of outthinking himself or forgetting what's been working for him. I did think there was a big effort early in the game to get Jamin on the field more. They were in true nickel as opposed to their Cinco nickel, which is a kind of a departure from what they would normally do. Then as the game went on, they kind of got back into that Cinco nickel, which is, the 5 defensive linemen, Cody, and then
backs, yeah.
Cam.
And then Cody.
And Cam in the box, right? So they kind of got back into that as the game went on, and I felt like they were better out of that from a pressure standpoint. But also, like, Sean Payton wasn't calling the stuff that was working for him on the first couple drives. Like they had kind of gotten away from that a little bit. So that was a little bit surprising. The next touchdown, the long touchdown to Mims, they're trying to get into like one of these cover 2 inverts that they run where they bring the corners, they drop the defensive tackles out, they have the safeties play halves, and then Cody Barton plays the middle of the field. I don't know exactly the rules on that coverage, but by rule of Tampa 2, general Tampa 2, Cody's got to carry that vertical. And Marvin Mims versus Cody Barton is a mismatch like 9 out of 10 times. So
yeah, that play, I watched it back. It was funny because Anthony yesterday comes into the bullpen as we're preparing for the show, and he's like, what happened on that play? I was like, let's pull it up. And nobody plays it well because there's just like, eventually you got to be football players kind of deal. And, I think you can make an argument that like, because Mims comes across the field, crosses the center line. And so like, okay, he's in Derek Forrest's deep half, right? Percy Butler, hey man, everything's happening in front of you. There's no one else close to you. Yeah. You should carry that. Cody Barton carrying the vertical is actually your responsibility. But like from a logic standpoint, like you just said, from a speed, like actual matchup standpoint, you have no shot. So it's hard to really get that mad at you. And there's just kind of a lot of dudes like covering no one. and that's not ideal. And that's the hard part about zone coverage and these match rules and how they play it. And from an analysis standpoint, nevertheless, an execution guys on the field standpoint is like you have things that pull you in opposite directions. Like I don't want to vacate this area because what if someone comes into it? But also, I don't know, that guy seems to be running wide open for a touchdown. Do I go chase him? And that's why it's hard. And they ran a cover 2 beater and they beat cover 2. Sometimes the offense wins.
Yeah. And again, like you'd like maybe them to say, oh, the 2 tight ends are locked up, and Percy should match that. But again, if they run a crosser the other way into the zone, which people do, they run a post by the 1 to his side and they run a crosser. If he matches the post, like
the crosser's wide open.
It's a touchdown to the crosser. So really, to me, that just feels like a good call versus a coverage that you're trying to kind of get them, you're trying to trick them. You're trying to trick them into kind of like, you're bringing these corners. You're trying to get the tackles to block down on the ends. You're dropping the defensive tackles out. You're trying to match crossers and kind of, and they just had a good call. Like they really just had an excellent call versus the structure that the defense presented, and it leads to a touchdown. So that's 14 points right there. Excellent starting drive. They had a run that was really giving them fits in terms of how they needed to fit it. And then they had a really good call versus a coverage it's not great against. So I mean that's really what it boils down to. And I think one of the reasons they're able to settle in the second half is I think Sean Payton gets away from the stuff that those runs that we were just describing, like, which is totally baffling to me. But whatever, they get back into that Cinco front. You get guys some one-on-one matchups, and that ends up playing out great for them. Not that Jamin or Cody were playing poorly. It's just that, like, you got your good players on the field, man. You get them in one-on-ones, and those guys are going to heat and hunt for you. And then I think they did a better job in coverage in the back end of kind of playing, I don't want to say more vanilla stuff, but stuff that they were more comfortable with. So there weren't as many free runners in the back end. Obviously, there's the touchdown with the crossers, which is a tough look. Again, they're basically running mesh out of a 3x2 out of empty. So the 2 crossers go. I think Jamin and Cody do a pretty good job, or Cam do a pretty good job of passing it off. But Benjamin St. Juice matches. So in mesh, you get the 2 inside guys cross, right?
Right.
I'm sure people can visualize that. Then you have a third element that's basically running a sit over the ball, but it looks like they're running like a high cross. So St. Juice, who again is out wider because it's an empty formation, matches that crosser and then matches that kind of sit route. And then the crosser comes up and it enters his zone and ends up being a touchdown. So that's what I would say there is, like, they just didn't, to me, that feels like a mental mistake by St. Juice.
Yeah, they put, St. Juice, Kendall, and Cody all in conflict, and they did not resolve said conflict.
I mean, that's why mesh is that's why mesh is good, man.
Yeah.
Mesh is good versus match. Mesh is good versus zone, because it forces guys to, like, play, communicate at a high level and kind of remember their rules very, very quickly. And they kind of came out and ran it out of a different formation, and they didn't see it quick enough, and it ended up being a touchdown. So
yeah, them's the breaks.
You get got sometimes.
Yeah, the offense. I mean, it's funny because we talk about the good stuff that happens on the offensive side in the film breakdown, and people are like, "Yeah, go get him, EB." And then when it happens to your defense, it's like, "How could you possibly ever let that happen?" And it's like, because sometimes the offense wins and sometimes the defense wins,
right.
And that happens in both sections of the podcast when we do the film breakdown.
Yeah.
They obviously do get back to that Cinco front a little bit later in the game, and you see that in the first possession of the second half, the Daron Payne 3 and out, which is just one of the most thoroughly dominant sequences of plays you'll ever see in the NFL from a singular player. Just a tremendous individual effort. And there are other guys that matter on that. Like, let's not make it wholly individual because his defensive line mates have to do their job, etc. But I wasn't kidding when Michael Phillips and I could have been playing safety on that. But the back end did not matter at all on those. Just such quick, violent wins by Daron. And you see that throughout the game, not just from Daron, but John has a couple. Montez obviously has a couple. Chase has a couple. And that's what can elevate this defense into the upper echelon, top 10, certainly top 5. If Chase is going to clean up a few things and stay, keep the great stuff. It's so funny to me how the discussions around Chase and the discussions around Sam wind up sounding the exact same. But, if he can now contribute on that higher level, like, the sky's the limit for this defense. And I think you see it. You saw the flashes that you want to see And then the question is, can they just be a little bit more consistent, and can they start faster, obviously, and make their lives a lot easier? Because against a team like Buffalo, perhaps, versus a team like Denver, the comeback might not be there in the way that it
Yeah.
was on Sunday.
Well, like I said, I've already started a little bit of the Bills prep, and that offense does a great job of just creating a ton of grass, and we'll preview them more in the preview show. But that's a scary bunch of playmakers over there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with you. I think obviously the thing with Duran, like they're trying to take a play action shot on the first play of that sequence, right, of the first half. They're trying to put.
Okay, so maybe Michael and I would not have been ideal at safety then.
But I think to your point though, like they're in a slide protection. The two tight ends are blocking Montez, like they're doubling him. You got McGlinchey has to block down on the three, and he basically is like, I've never seen a three technique before in my life. I'm going to take like terrible footwork. And Duran's like, sweet, knock your inside hand down and get a sack. Like, talk about a quick win. Like, holy cow, man. And so again, that's what that structure, that front structure gives you, is it makes it a little bit, the footwork changes a little bit for the offensive line, the protection rules change a little bit, and you get stuff like that. The next play, they're trying to run the football, and Duran goes a little bit rogue, but basically says, I'm going to beat this guy inside. Beats him inside. There's a huge crease, but I think it'd be interesting to talk to him about it because the back's an offset gun away. So Duran's on the defensive left, and the back is offset to the defensive right. And so when that happens, you got to know as a blocker and as a defender, it takes the back longer to get to the play side of the run, which is one of the reasons I freaking hate offset gun runs, because it basically plays like tight zone. And so Duran, I would bet the second he gets that hat to him, he says, I can win this inside because the back is so far away. Beats the guard inside, plays vertical, makes the tackle for loss. Love that. I love that little detail. And again, it'd be interesting to ask him if he recognized that or if he just was like, I felt the guard overreach and I went for it. The next play, Montez Sweat with an excellent ET. He absolutely smokes the guard. He's got a free run to the quarterback. Russell Wilson vacates to the right. Duran does a great job of keeping contain on that play and bats the football down. So it wasn't entirely Duran, but like pretty damn close, man. You know what I mean? Pretty damn close. And again, great job by Montez there. But like that sequence to me, and couple that with the sequence that they had last week against Arizona, where it's like, I think it was Duran tackle for loss, Allen tackle for loss, Montez sack. Like that, those sequences didn't happen last year, or at least I don't remember them happening, where they were like, hold up, timeout, like we're done with whatever's happening right now. We're just going to assert ourselves on this game. And that to me is the characteristic, and I've said this a million times, that's the characteristic of a dominant group. So for them to come out, play the way they did, for Chase to play the way he did coming back on 40 snaps was awesome. Again, Montez, great day. Like there are times where that pocket just, it doesn't even look like it's there. It's just a sieve of bodies running to him and guys just winning one-on-one. And I think in Allen's post-game presser, he's like, it's a race, man. It's like, I'm trying to beat them because there's only a finite number of sacks you can get in a game, and we're all racing to get there. And that's a very scary notion, especially when guys are being productive with their rushes and getting what they got to get.
What about Chase specifically? Certainly an up and down day. There are some rushes where he gets way too high. Yeah. There's some times he gets kind of buried inside, and there's alleys to the outside. But I think what's cool is you see as the game goes, I feel like it happened a little bit less, or like, he does it on one snap, and the very next snap he is super tight and he's super on the screws. I also think as the game goes, you see him and Allen playing with each other a little bit more. The way that they're able to do some stunts, some twists, some games up front, or just John realizes that like I got to pay a little bit more attention to what Chase is doing and then cover for him if he's going to do stuff. And I don't know which one of those it is, but I feel like he got better as the game went.
Sure.
And you see the high upside stuff that makes him super special. And if they can keep tightening the screws, then it's just going to get better and better as the year goes. And then, who knows?
Yeah. I mean, there was a couple rushes where I was like, man, that could be better. And there was one. So for example, on the fumble, on Jamin's fumble, like he goes violent inside rush. And I was like, I wonder, like that's poor rushing integrity, right? Because, obviously Russell Wilson's going to escape and scramble for a first down. But I do remember in the game plan show that I did with Coach Ron Rivera, I said, how do you kind of manage like a rusher's creativity? Because, they're basically artists, you know what I mean? Like they're gonna like the creative rushers are the best rushers. The ones that rush outside of structure are the best because they can kind of do whatever, and it puts the offensive line in a bind. And he said, well, I think one of the things Jack has done a good job of is identifying packages where they can be Rembrandt, where they can go do what they want to do. And
did Ron really say Rembrandt?
No, I said Rembrandt.
Okay.
I'm churching up a little bit
Okay.
for Ron's sake. Anyway, but in that look, Jamin is spying Russell. And so if you're going to be Rembrandt in a situation, it's that situation. And then, so great inside move, vacates the pocket, and Jamin is really fast. Like, he is very, very fast. Like, holy cow, watching him to run that down was so impressive. And
so this is a point I made yesterday, but I want to make it here too.
Yeah.
This is the difference between a first round pick and like a third round, fourth round guy at linebacker is, let's just make it David Mayo. David Mayo could also spy Russell Wilson.
Yes.
But he probably runs him out of bounds, and it's probably a 2-3 yard gain. Jamin is so fast that he gets there before the sideline and is able to force a fumble. And that 1 to 2 yard difference, right? It's a sack, it's behind line of scrimmage, but that 1 to 2 yard difference of escorting him out of bounds and having to live to fight another down versus the game-changing turnover is what makes a guy like Jamin Davis worth a first round pick.
Yeah.
Now he's got to be more consistent over time, and I'd like to see him play more and all those types of things. But like when you talk about the special stuff of a Montez, of a Chase, of a Jamin Davis, like that's the level of detail that we're talking about. 1 to 2 yards here and there, which is the difference between a turnover and a 3 yard gain out of bounds that is just a mundane play in the NFL.
Yeah, and so I mean, if anybody has time, go watch it. Watch from the end zone, because it looks like everyone's kind of in slow motion, and he's like sped up for some reason, and the way he closes that distance is pretty spectacular. So that's one where I think maybe Chase has got a little bit more free reign to kind of be creative with his rush. There's another one where he gets high. You're like, man, that's way too high in the rush. Russell steps up, finds the lane, runs for a first down. I think they get a holding call, so it's negated. Not on Chase, but you're like, come on, Chase, be more disciplined. But to his credit, man, the very next play, he's got very next rush, very tight rush angle. He's almost shoulder to shoulder with John. John does a great job of collapsing the pocket. There's nowhere for Russell to go. And then Chase escapes late and then runs him down and gets his first sack of the game, And I'm like, that maturity by him is something that we didn't see a lot when he was healthy last year or 2 years ago. And to see that kind of starting to come on his own, like that was a self-correction because he didn't have time to go to the sideline and get yelled at by Ron or Coach Scanino. Like, he had to say, man, I was too high. Let me fix that up. There was another one where I thought, it looks like he's coming in underneath, and then Montez ends up getting a sack coming over the top. But that is a rush plan versus scrambling quarterbacks. And I wonder if that was an opportunity for him to work an inside move. Montez takes it really high, understanding where he's going to vacate, knowing he's getting inside pressure, and Montez gets the sack. So I do think there was some times where he was rushing, maybe you'd have to ask him about it, but just to my eye, rushing really well in the context of the rush and making corrections in game that I thought were very mature. So from a pass rush standpoint, I was very, very pleased with what he was doing. I thought he showed good power, thought he showed a good understanding of the line, was very deliberate with that, and had dominant elements to his game, which is something that we've all been kind of waiting for from a pass rush standpoint. He's always been pretty good against the run, but to see him kind of be that guy like Max Crosby. I've been watching a lot of Max Crosby because Las Vegas last week, they played the Bills, so watching him. He is so consistent about rushing his line, rushing his pass rush line, the line between him and the quarterback, and not deviating from it. Mm-hmm. Like, the tackle has to be perfect for 60 snaps if he's pass blocking him, right? And I saw a little bit of that from Chase, which gets me really excited that as he starts to go and continue to improve, that rush line is going to be super dialed in, and he's going to be much more productive this year. So, again, first game back, some things that were not good, some things that could have been better. But I think on the whole, after watching the film, I was more pleased than displeased and more excited about the future with him.
All right, last thing, back end wise, you had some fun at my expense because on the pregame show, my key to the game was no explosives, and you're like, "Cool, good analysis, bro. How do you do it?" That was kind of your comment on the postgame, which I was like, that's a fair point. The answer is don't bust coverage. How do you call stuff that your guys can execute and you do not lose guys? And so I think a comment you made about 10 minutes ago at this point of they switched to a little bit more vanilla coverage on the back end, obviously plays into that. How do you prevent coverage busts? How do you prevent explosives? You make sure you keep everything in front of you, even if you give some stuff up and you're not confusing quarterbacks. And I think the benefit at this point with the personnel that you have is you can do that stuff and still create turnovers because Emmanuel Forbes is a turnover machine. And you've got speed all over the field. And that's fantastic because the simpler it is for you, the better, the less chance that someone's going to make some kind of critical mistake. So when we talk about the things to clean up and starting faster, how much do you think that plays into it moving forward of maybe Jack dials it back a little bit earlier in games to make sure that his group gets into a nice rhythm and that there are no big explosive plays available because of, self mistakes?
Yeah, no, let's be clear. I don't want to make it sound like Jack was going crazy out there. He just had a couple calls early that, are a little bit of a novelty item, and they've run them a lot in training camp or whatever, but they're a little bit new and they just didn't execute. It was a good call by Sean Payton. The other thing to the kind of this point that you're talking about is like they got a little bit simpler, and simple is a relative term here. Like the defense that they're running are insanely complicated because they're running all these matches. They got to match 3x1s. The rules
there's
change.
A ton of rules.
It's crazy. So it's very complicated. But I did feel like they did a good job of kind of bouncing between match and softer coverages. And the other thing is like they were more consistent in the second half, and the Broncos weren't. And I think that is also kind of to your point, like you made me think about it with the Forbes thing, is Forbes gets an interception because Cortland Sutton is running a route that like doesn't appear to be in the playbook. He's running like a hitch, but he's running it at like 15 yards. And I've never been exposed to a hitch at that depth. And so Russell Wilson's expecting him to be there. He's not there. Kudos to Forbes though, like playing with excellent technique, right? Because he's playing like this kind of catch to soft quarters look where he's kind of his hips are open to the quarterback and he's kind of backpedaling. And, if he's matching the receiver, there's no way he makes the play. But if he's playing the technique correctly, makes an excellent play on the football. So I do think that, again, that's like a base day one coverage for them. I do think the more of that stuff you see, the better it gets. Even on Chase's sack, Cortland Sutton basically is blocking the corner and Russell's trying to throw him the football. So, like, obviously, like, there's an element of like, hey, man, offensively and defensively, let's keep it simple so our guys do what they're supposed to do and we can play fast. And I felt like in the second half of that game, kind of getting back to that Cinco stuff, again, simpler coverage structures ends up paying dividends for them down the road. Also, there were some great pressure packages I thought Jack brought that allowed them to kind of, again, not all the time, but sprinkled in a little bit. Like, for example, they run like a Cinco where they're dropping guys out, they stunt Payne, and then Barton's like looping around as the spy, and they get a great hit on the quarterback. So there was enough variation, I thought, but they got away from like the super intricate stuff. And I do think that moving forward, that is something that is going to be really advantageous for this group because when they're playing fast, like they're an excellent group.
Yeah, no, without question. Because, dude, when this team plays fast, they are real fast. Fast. I mean, the speed you have, all three levels is pretty spectacular. From Montez and Chase on the edges to Barton and especially Jamin in the middle, or Cam when he's playing down on that second level, and then on the back end, guys like Percy Butler, Emmanuel Forbes, incredible speed. So they cover a lot of grass, and that shows up week to week on the tape. All right, anything else from the game? If not, we can get up on out of here.
I think that's it. I mean, we kind of covered all the big plays, I think, and there was the one to Forbes, the deep pass. He just gets beat by a guy who's a little bit faster than him. That happens sometimes, but I feel like he's actually in pretty good technique and pretty good phase overall. But I think there's a lot of really good things, both offensively and defensively, to learn from, and also some things that make you get really excited moving forward. Some bad stuff to improve, and some really high level stuff that you say, man, if they can do more of that, they're going to be a dangerous group, and they're going to. This is something we said, like I think in our preview of the season, is like if they can play consistent, tough football, they're going to punch up. They're going to win games they shouldn't win, and this game felt like that a little bit. Handled the adversity, got after it. So I'm excited, man. And hopefully this crowd is bumping for this Bills game because that's going to be a lot of fun.
I cannot wait. I will be at FedEx this weekend. I said that for week one, and then I got. by the sickness. Please, to whatever deities are in control of said things, whatever one you pray to, allow me to be at FedEx Field this weekend. It's going to be a good time. All right. When we get back on the preview pod, we will obviously take a look at the Buffalo Bills and how the Commanders match up against them. If you want a deeper dive on the screen game, make sure you check out Take 5 from yesterday. We'll do some Buffalo stories on Take 5 for tomorrow. And then Friday morning, the preview pod comes out. We might have a special guest for that one. Working on that. I don't want to promise anything, but we're working on it. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe, and that way you get everything as soon as it comes out on your favorite podcast, audio or video platform. And we'll see you later in the week on Take Command. Thanks for watching this clip of Take Command. First, why don't you like it? It lets other people know that it was good, and then they should watch it too. And Logan, we have a new exclusive home for full episodes.
We do. 1067 The Fans YouTube page. Go check it out and please subscribe.
Yeah, do what Logan said.
Do it.
Very, very smart.